Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, the ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with...
I'm Dan, the ambassador of nonsense. Welcome everybody.
It's been... We took 2 weeks off, partly because my phone was broke, but also for other reasons. We just... I didn't really know what to say during those 2 weeks.
It's kind of strange, isn't it?
Because I wasn't... Until his inauguration, I was not sure that Biden was going to be our president. And
there was kind of a brief limbo there, wasn't there?
Yeah. I mean, I had certain... I don't want to say they're expectations. They were ideas about what Trump could be doing. And maybe they were unreasonable. But I guess when I think about the logistics of it and what exactly it would mean for the country, maybe it was kind of unreasonable, but I still thought it was possible. And he was the one who kept saying, I will never stop fighting. And it seems like maybe he did. But then again,
or
what would have been necessary I think a lot of lives might have ended if he had done something more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, it was clear that the even now I'm seeing reports of like Antifa and BLM riots and stuff like that. Even today, they're continuing. So it's like we're sitting on such a powder keg of left, discontent that's just ready to explode. Even though their guy is now presumably in the White House.
Yeah, they're still angry.
And just think if Trump had somehow manipulated to where he was in the White House and perhaps he said, you know what, it's not worth the lives lost.
Yeah, that is possible. The thing is, I even hear conservative people, and I don't mean fake conservative like Mitch McConnell, who is a fake. I hear them say, well, no, that this is not the time for any kind of violent fight. And to me, I think, well, we've proven that that a lot of these people are bought and paid for by China. I mean, and we've got evidence that China owned the voting machines. So how is this not a time for violence? When is a time for violence? But I mean, if I'm the only one who thinks that, or a very small number of people think that, then I guess it's not, because it's not a time for violence if you can't win.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. You've got to have some reasonable expectation that the outcome is going to be what you want it to be.
Which is what we said from the very start, and we said that doing things like storming the White House or whatever would be stupid if Trump isn't leading it. If Trump is not directing it, then it's really just more rioting and destruction, and that's not really. But there was some stuff going on at the White House. I kind of think what happened is a bunch of Antifa people pretended to be Trump supporters and got a few of the not quite as smart Trump supporters wound up. And talk them into entering the Capitol building. But I hear all kinds of stories, and from what I understand, there wasn't really anyone trying to stop them, so they just kind of went in, and these Trump supporters are, they're at a Trump rally. We're going to this is what we're doing, and they just did it. And
there was no serious resistance, which makes you think that there was some kind of planning ahead of time. Yeah. And I suspect that the at least the high-ranking, especially the liberal lawmakers, probably knew that it was going to happen. They probably had a certain aspect of it choreographed.
Yeah, that's the way it would seem. So
it has that feel to me.
Yeah. Well,
now, not that the people who entered the Capitol were in on the plan. You know what I mean?
Right. It was.
When
you get a group like
I don't
that,
want to suggest that
there are certain members of them who are kind of easy to manipulate.
Yeah. One or two well placed, provocateurs, agents provocateur, And yeah, you can affect something like that without too much trouble.
Yeah. So, oh well, it happened. The people who did do it are being punished, and I feel kind of sorry for them.
A whole lot of other
people
are being punished.
Yeah, some people who didn't
and a
do
whole
this
bunch of others
were just. I thought going there to Washington was kind of pointless anyway. Yeah,
it wasn't going to change or affect anything.
Yeah,
it was done, However, I think that because of the number of people and the names of the people who were there, they were high profile. They were, boots on the ground conservative leadership types that show that there's a real popular support for the kind of government that Trump was leading us towards, a real drained swamp, a real, let's rip out the establishment mentality. And the real establishment mentality is this idea among so many of the congressmen, especially the senators. The Senate is a higher office than the House of Representatives. And so especially among senators and clearly, those who may at some point see themselves in the White House, they see their political posts as a birthright or entitlement. They don't see it as a privilege.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was being challenged here. And I think that's the really good takeaway from this, is to see that there really is a big support for getting that kind of mentality out of Washington.
Right. Let's attack this subject of today's podcast in 3 sections. And I don't know if we'll even have time for all 3, but they're big discussions. And I think it's time to be really brutally honest about a couple things. Number 1, where are we right now? Number 2, how did we get here? And number 3, what should we do? What's our next step? Where are we going?
Right.
And of course, one is, where we are right now, there are still people who don't quite get it. I was in a discussion with some guy. I was just working on a machine, and this is just another blue collar guy, and this is pretty anecdotal, but I know it exists out there. We're talking about what happened, and he's going on about how, I have a feeling this is the first, the past 4 years is the first time he ever paid attention to politics, but he's talking about how we're gonna crush the Democrats in 2022 and win the House and the Senate back.
Oh, in the mid-year or the midterms. Yeah. Okay.
Which statistically does happen, but I didn't really know what to say to him. But I thought, did you not see what just happened here? We won the presidency, and it's not ours. So,
and we still couldn't, right?
I mean,
yeah. So that's a good point. However, one of the things is that I really don't have a good answer for that. I was going to talk about how a lot of the both the representatives and even the senators are districted. So like the state will have.
Yeah, I know.
I think some states can elect the senators at large, and then some states, it's like each senator has, part of the state that votes for him, and the other part votes for the other guy.
And we talked about this off the air, and I think the local elections are every bit as crummy as we've seen happen in the federal election. I just don't think they've ever. I think in the past, the local elections are the most crooked. And they've never been able to coordinate that to make it spell out in a federal election.
Right.
And I think that's what happened now.
Probably, I would say now, not now. I would say within the last maybe 20 years, because the truth is that the more of this technology we bring into the electoral process, the easier it is to coordinate the local corruption that exists, and let's not anybody pretend that it doesn't exist, into something that can affect something at a statewide or national level.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is that this kind of coordination, one of the things that people will say over and over is that, well, we really don't see reason to believe that there was widespread election tampering or fraud or corruption. But the thing is, because of the way populations work within states and how populations tend to center around certain cities and that kind of stuff, it doesn't need to be widespread in order to affect a national elected office. And that's one of the realities that these modern technological approaches to voting, such as the Dominion voting machines, but they're not the only ones. Any kind of machine that is going to, be out there using the internet for its connection to the county, the Board of Elections servers and stuff like that, whatever it is, it's going to be open to some kind of manipulation. And the more technology there is behind it, the easier it can be manipulated without anybody being able to say, here's how you manipulated it.
Right. All the number spikes that we see and are very obvious to us right now can be hidden better as we get better at cheating.
Right.
Right. They can be turned into
that's a
gradual
reality.
things and not spikes. And, on top of that, who cares anyway? We see what the Republican senators did. Very few of them really gave any kind of effort in this to fight for our rights.
No, exactly.
So if we elect a bunch
that,
of Mitch McConnells, who the heck cares?
Then
we're back to where we were.
Why bother to vote for Mitch McConnell versus a Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, they're gonna work together. Especially when it comes to protecting the entitled establishment.
And in the past, they put on such a good show that most people were fooled by it. Again, I've talked about it before, I stopped being fooled by it a long time ago, and I almost kind of stopped paying attention to politics altogether. And you have to admit that even you thought they were a lot less important than everybody else thought they were because of the handshaking going on between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Oh, right, right, absolutely, yeah.
What we're seeing now is they're trying to create this one-party system, and we're at a point where it really is one party. We have to start recognizing that. The Republicans are not fighting for us. And even Rush Limbaugh today is kind of on the verge of getting behind another party, which is something I never thought I'd hear him do.
He's been a big strategic thinker in that regards. Yeah. Right.
In today's show, he said, okay, if there was ever a time for a third party, now is it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's right, because I don't think it would be only Republicans going to this party. I think the
that's
MAGA
a good point.
Was full of Democrats.
There were a lot of converted Democrats in the MAGA movement, especially Democrats who, maybe they fully believed it. All of the social programs and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what they started experiencing under Trump was that if Trump did something that is praiseworthy in their worldview, they would go ahead and praise it because that's what normal people do.
Yeah.
And then they would suddenly be ostracized by family and friends and canceled and so on and so forth. And there's, wait a minute, what is this?
Right.
You can't even say that the guy did a good thing when he did a good thing. And that's where this, they started really experiencing being on the receiving end of this Trump derangement syndrome. That's a real thing. And I think it still exists, even though Trump's no longer in the White House.
Yeah. And I worry about the man's safety.
I think we got a lot of converts sort of that way, not religious converts, but people who said, wait a minute, this party that I've been supporting all this time and this so-called, liberal progressive movement that I've been part of all this time, they're not who they look like they are. They're not who they have been claiming to be.
Trump converted more minorities than any other Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I think that's going to continue campaign. Because now with them, I've heard this before and I've always laughed at it. People would say now that the Democrats are in power, they're going to screw up so badly that people won't be able to deny it. And, hey, Obama did that. Look how bad things got. And yet people deny it.
Obama was the worst president ever. And there are still people who say he was a good president.
Yeah, so I don't think that's normally the case, except that there's going to be such a sharp difference.
It'll be a sharp inflection, yeah.
I mean,
going to be
Trump's economy,
turn.
Even with the COVID, bounced back incredibly well. And now they're saying, well, okay, Biden's goal is to get the pre-COVID economy back, which he's not going to be able to do because he's stupid. And Democrats
and he wants to manage everything top down.
They've already stopped the pipeline that Trump got going and a couple other things. The Paris Accord. I mean, within the first few hours, that's what he's done already. He's screwed the American people already. So, okay, they're not going to get the economy back.
And he's screwed the American people over.
But, people like Clinton, Clinton did a couple things that made it look like the economy was great. He pulled some double talk about the national, can't think of the word, not debt.
Oh, it's not that. It's
deficit.
The deficit, right. So the deficit is the annual spending versus taxes.
Yeah.
Basically.
And there is
a lot of room to create double talk there, because what you have is there are spending programs, there are aspects of spending that are simply renewed every day in law, or not every day, every year in law. And then there's additional spending that is discretionary on top of that. And so when they look at the deficit, they're looking at this discretionary spending, not necessarily including the spending that's going to be there anyway. The I forget what they call it, but it's a baseline spending. And so it's only this differential against the baseline spending that they're looking at, and then they compare that with the expected tax revenues, and they'll say, oh, there's a surplus, there's going to be a surplus or whatever. There's all kinds of ways that they can play with those numbers that people who it's not like I understand the internals of it, but I know enough to know that people who don't understand the internals of it can never uncover exactly what a politician means when he says something about the spending deficit or surplus,
and not only
even
that,
the national debt.
He also arranged for banks to give out millions of dollars of loans to people who could not pay them back. So everything
which caused a lot
up.
of people to go out and buy houses, which made it look like there was this incredible, new growth in new housing projects, which is one index of the economy. Hey, it must be that the economy's doing great. Oh, yeah, well, only because you're setting it up for a big crash.
Yeah, and George W. Bush inherited that.
Yeah.
And so it looks like Clinton had a great economy and Bush had a recession, which he did bounce back pretty well from. But Trump's economy has given Biden a lot of room, to screw up.
That's because Trump's economy was based on productivity, not just playing phony games with numbers.
So
Trump
Biden can screw
America's...
up pretty good without certain people really being able to see the screw up. But he's still going to screw it up. It's everything that should be up is going to go down, and everything down is going to go up. So,
not just economically either.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, under Biden, we're going to see a resurgence of groups like ISIS.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have another 9/11 under Biden.
Yeah.
And, I mean, are people going to say he's a great president then?
Well, that's another...
They'll probably blame it on Trump.
That opens another... Yeah, they will. That opens another doorway. I mean, we've been talking politically where we are, but culturally, on the one hand, we're not much better there either. I mean, look, you go to the grocery store and everybody's wearing a mask. Nobody is defying this weird world, Twilight Zone world, where they tell you you're spreading disease even though you don't have a disease and things like that. Yeah. Nobody's fighting it. Culturally, we're in a bad spot.
This is one of the biggest Emperor's New Clothes phenomena aspects of the modern, modern America and I guess the modern world. But
yeah, it's going on all over the
come
world.
On, use your common sense and don't throw your common sense out the window just because a bunch of people who you think ought to know better have told you this is the way it should be.
And if it was, it's even more than common sense. I mean, we've got scientific studies showing that this is nonsense. You don't have to do this. We don't have to close schools, restaurants, or bars, but people are doing it anyway, and some people are just happy to.
What's the grounding basis for all of this stuff? What do they say? Why do they say they want to do it? Oh, well, we got to do it in order to save lives. Well, not only scientific studies, we've got plenty of economic studies already in place demonstrating that the lives lost because of the economic downturn are far greater than the highest projections of lives lost from COVID would have been if it had been not even handled.
Yeah. I mean, like my father-in-law went in the hospital this week because of breathing problems. And his breathing got worse while he was in there. And my mother-in-law said, well, he needs his breathing treatments. He gets 4 a day. He has to have those. He won't breathe if he doesn't have them. They said, no, we can't give him those because it might spread COVID. So until he tests negative for COVID, he can't have his breathing treatments. That's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
We're going to let him die so that he doesn't spread COVID.
Right. He's in a hospital.
I guess that's... My gosh. The insanity has... It's got to end somewhere.
You would think.
I think of it like there's some aspect of culture, of human nature, of human society. At some point, there's got to be a end, a terminus to the stupidity, where people say, "Oh wait, we've gone too far," and turn around. I guess not, though. I mean, cultures just kind of go out of existence, don't they?
Yeah. Well, the fact is, we're not there yet because people are still walking around with masks on, or like riding bicycles or driving their cars with a mask on while they're alone.
People alone outside in their car, on a bike, whatever, and they're wearing a mask.
Yeah, and I think, look, our teenagers have gotten to the point where they live through their screens, and I think they're okay with hiding their faces because they've been hiding their faces for a long time. They don't expose
their faces anyway. That's true.
That's true. I think these two things kind of correlate somehow. The fact that as a culture, we've been living through our screens, and now we're hiding more of ourselves, and we're happy to do it because I guess we just aren't comfortable with ourselves and with other people.
That must be it. It's like somebody who spent all his life in a cave, and then he meets other people, and it's like he's not going to know how to react.
Right.
It
makes you feel uncomfortable or something.
It's kind of the caricature of computer science engineers, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. But the thing is, culturally, we are in a bad spot, and then spiritually, on the one hand,
culturally, I would say that the right description culturally is that we're gilded. Especially it's disappointing in the rest of the world. I guess it's sad in the rest of the world, but it's especially disappointing in the United States because having that, we're going to do what needs to be done and what ought to be done regardless of what anybody else tells us they want us to do. That's a distinctly American trait.
Right.
And we've given that up. I mean, we've handed over our American manliness, so to speak, as a culture, to join the rest of the world's effeminacy. Right.
And yeah, it's a shame. And that is where we are. And that leads into the fact that so many Christians and Catholics are willing to say, okay, we won't go to church. And
yeah,
I mean, we've become a lazy group of people. I mean, I guess this leads into the discussion of how did we get here? Because I think especially Christians have gotten so comfortable with the fact that you don't have to fight to be a Christian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
we've forgotten that we here on earth we're supposed to think of ourselves as the church militant.
Yeah. And we haven't been militant. We've been it's gotten to the where most people
we've been the
never
church acquiescent.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other thing. The fact that we have bishops who are not leading us and a pope who is, I don't know what he's doing. He's like leading us to the wrong direction.
Yeah, I do not get this pope. But yeah, the American bishops especially, it's like, are they happy now that their guy is in the White House and he's, his top agenda is to, boost abortions? It's like, that's one of the first things he says he's going to do. Yeah. He's going to roll back all of the pro-life executive decisions that Trump has in place.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, bishops, there you go. What do you say to God when he asks you about those babies' lives? I would really like to know what American bishops are thinking about that question now, because they need to be thinking about that. If they're not thinking about it, then they ought to just get out of the church. They're just posers. They're not even taking their job seriously, their vocation seriously, if this doesn't bother them.
Well, and then there's the fact that as a Catholic people, how many people do you think fast every year? Not a very large percentage.
No.
And I'm talking about on the necessary
every year.
days.
You talk about like just for
Friday and Wednesday. Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. Those are the only 2 days we have to fast.
Mandatory days. Yeah.
And most people don't even do that. Now when you get to things like doing something extra, like abstaining on Friday, most people don't even know they're supposed to, let alone do it.
Right. That's I got to sideline here and say that's how when you've crossed the line into getting old. So the fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, it used to be, okay, I'm going to fast all day. And then guess what? At midnight, oh man, I'm going to go get, 3 kinds of food that I was just waiting for.
Yeah.
Well, now I fast all day. And at midnight, it's like, I'm even too tired to go make it now. It's late. I'm going to bed. I'll eat breakfast
in the morning. Yeah.
No, but that brings up a good point is that I think the spiritual state of the United States, and especially Catholics in the United States, because Catholics are in the unique position to be able to court favor with God through the Mass. Protestants can't do that. Only Catholics can do that. The Catholic Mass is the one unique act by which we can call the graces of God in abundance upon us as a society. And the fact that we're in this position shows how deplorably we have not been making use of that on behalf of the rest of our nation.
Right. Yeah. So the fact that we're so weak is because we've been so weak.
Yeah.
And because we've relaxed and we don't fast enough, we don't pray enough. Now, I know there are people out there who's like, well, I fast every week and I say the rosary and I do this and that. And obviously I'm talking collectively. As a nation, we haven't been doing it.
And not just as a nation broadly, but as a nation of Catholics, as a collection of Catholics within the nation, as American Catholics, we have not been doing this.
Yeah. It used to be that you would see a big family and you assumed they were Catholic. Now you see a big family, you assume they're on welfare. That's sad.
It is. It is sad. I was reading those letters that I have I don't have them anymore. Dad has them now. But those letters that Kathy found that Dad had written to Aunt Berta, who, for anybody who hasn't listened to some of our old podcasts, she passed away recently. She's actually our dad's aunt. And anyway, he was in the Navy and he's writing these letters. And in one of them, he said, I saw a nice sign on the way to Chow. And the letter dated, it's kind of weird. He never put actual dates on his letter. He would just put like Thursday, 1957 or something like that.
I guess he wrote often enough to where...
Yeah, but this one was like on I think it was maybe like on a Friday. It was, I am almost positive it was one of the Ember Days, which the old church used to have Ember Days. There were, I think, like 4 feasts a year that Ember Days were tied to, and on the octave of the Ember Day, you were supposed to fast or something like that. I don't know what the whole liturgical makeup was. I would like to relearn that and maybe even start living it myself. But anyway, I think it was one of those days. He said, I saw a nice sign on the way to Chow. They had a sign said, Catholics, this is a day of strict fasting. And I'm sure he was expecting to get some food, and it's like, shoot, no, I can't.
Yeah, it's a day of fasting. Great, they remind. It's like those days when we were young adults, teenagers maybe, when it's like you would go through the day, and then toward the end of the day, right before, say, 7 o'clock Mass, Mom would be like, did you get to Mass? It's a day of obligation. You're like, dang it. If you hadn't have told me, I wouldn't have had to go. But now I got to go.
Yeah.
And, if you didn't know it was a day of fasting, suddenly you do, and it's
once upon a time, it's like even if you weren't Catholic, you knew that Catholics had to do something today.
Right.
And if you were Catholic, of course you knew it. Because people talked about it. People lived the liturgical year together. And we don't do that as Catholics anymore. And that, aside from the spiritual, I want to tie this back into the cultural that we were talking about, because there's I think a strong correlation between, the broad individual spiritual habits we have and the broad cultural practices we have, as far as the kinds of things that you would consider virtues in a worldly sense. Things like integrity and honesty and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Hard work, character, exactly. And one of the things that Thomas Aquinas points out is that in a well-founded republic, it's extremely unlikely that the republic is going to fall into a state of tyranny, which is what we're falling into, except it's a weird sort of tyranny that it's like the tyranny isn't being necessarily imposed top down by one guy. It's more like a tyranny of more like an oligarchy, a bunch of people who appointed themselves the arbiters of the right way of thinking are going to impose that on everybody else. But it's basically a tyranny. But he points out that it's extremely unlikely that a republic is going to fall into a tyranny when the populace, the citizens of that republic, are generally virtuous people.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly true, and I think that exactly plays into where we are now. We, for the last half century, as a population, have not been a virtuous people.
Yeah. That brought us to where we are now. And so the only thing here to do in response to this is reverse that, and which is extremely hard to do. You don't see societies getting more and more religious.
No, not gradually. Once in a while, you see instances in history where somebody comes along and within a generation seems to transform a society.
Right. St. Francis of Assisi.
St. Francis, that's, the example par excellence, I think. But there have been other examples. And so, sure, it's possible that it can turn around. But the fact is, the transformation always comes through an initial impulse back towards God.
Yeah.
People never first figure out the virtue thing, and then by being virtuous, figure out the God thing, the spiritual thing. It's always God first.
Yeah.
And so as Catholics, if we care about our nation, that's what we need to be about. That's our path to bringing it back out and transforming it.
Through prayer and fasting and hopefully the sacraments, if they're still there.
Right. To the extent that we can, the sacraments. I know that there are those in government who would love to shut that down completely.
Yeah.
And I know that there are American bishops out there who would go right along with it if such a plan were laid out. It's disgusting that that's the case, but you can't think that that's not the case if you've been paying attention.
Right. And through these, we could become more holy and try to bring people into our crowd. When Jesus was first crucified, he had thousands of disciples and stuff, but it was a pretty limited group. And so the apostles went out and started preaching the gospel, and it did spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
It wasn't
under persecution. But here's the thing. You know why it spread? It spread because it was God's plan and God's providence and everything else. But in terms of human dynamics, one of the big mechanisms that it spread was that people were willing to go to their death because of this thing that they believed and this thing that they had, this Eucharist that they had. They went to death because of the Holy Eucharist and the Holy Mass. Other people witnessed that and said, wow, that somebody's willing to go to death for that. I want to know more about that. And they went to death joyfully.
Yeah.
So, so if we're saying, all right, that's, we can use that as a model, well, what do we got to do? We got to say, no, we're not going to stop receiving the Holy Eucharist. We're not going to stop preaching the gospel. We're not going to stop trying to bring people to Jesus. And when the world persecutes us because of it, we're going to suffer that joyfully and continue preaching the gospel and continue bringing people to Jesus and to the Holy Mass and the Holy Eucharist. And then when we suffer and other people see our suffering and we're joyful about it, that's how we convert people. Okay, well, how many people are up for that?
Right, we're in a situation where most
I'm not looking forward to it.
are not even willing to get up on Sunday mornings for their God because they would rather sleep in. But what if not only did you not get to sleep in, but you got put to death? Right now there'd be very few takers, I think.
Right.
And that's what has to change, but that comes about with usually a few people in the beginning praying and fasting and living a holy life unashamedly and probably being persecuted for it, which is really, I think, our next direction. We're in this situation because, first of all, because not enough of us prayed and fasted. And second of all, a lot of people did it in private, and I don't mean pray and fast in private. I mean they weren't publicly Catholic. The Catholics that you see in church every week now are not publicly Catholic. They would never admit that they're Catholic. In situations where they might get fired or get in some kind of trouble. Or if they're the good kinds of Catholics who say, no, what you do is okay and what I do is okay. But we have to start taking up space if we're going to get our country back. At the same time, as I've mentioned before, we do have to start learning how to do things under the radar, I think. For example, some kind of barter system. I don't know.
Right. I mean, figuring out that's one of the things is and I'm kind of trying to work out in my head, and I'm writing notes down on paper and stuff about the different things that we need to figure out how to do that are going to matter. I mean, there's obviously, the whole communication aspect. Well, what if we want to talk? There's, first of all, internal communication. We want to be able to talk to each other openly. What if more and more forces of technology, even assuming that the American government doesn't go wonky and start finding, reasons to exclude things we might say from First Amendment protections. You've got all this big tech censorship going on. Okay, well, how do we get around that and make it at the very least so that we can use technology to reach out to each other across distances and maintain a sense of community? Okay, that's one. Then but that's not good enough. We also need to figure out how do we make ourselves a presence in the public square, because it's not enough to just talk to each other about ourselves. We still have a command to bring others to Christ. We've got to preach the gospel. We've got to find ways to do that in a public square that the frameworks that the big tech are setting up and trying to replace the old public square, which were, public festivals and maybe flyers and that kind of stuff. Well, now everybody wants to make it, do a Facebook thing, this, and a group that, and so on and so forth. Well, they're trying to shut that stuff down. So we got to figure out, how do we still make ourselves relevant in the public square? And then there's the whole political thing and the voting thing, and we've talked about that a little, but I'm not going to bring that up, my ideas here. But then there's the other one, commerce. We've got to still engage in commerce. And we've got a world that increasingly is going to say, oh, wait, you're the wrong kind of person. You don't think like I do. We don't want you doing commerce with us. And so you've got, people like Mike Lindell of My Pillow being canceled from places like Kohl's just because he happens to believe that there's persuasive evidence of election tampering in this 2020 election. This is the world we're going into. We've got to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think there are these vaccines. I don't know what's going to happen now. I know that leading up to Biden's inauguration, there was leading up to the election, there was talk of these vaccines becoming mandatory and needing some kind of vaccine in order to engage in commerce. And I guess right away, the first thing you start thinking of is the number of the beast. I don't necessarily think that. But if they make a vaccine that is produced from the cells of a murdered baby, and if in order to engage in commerce, you have to have that vaccine, that becomes a big problem.
That's real problematic. Yeah. Now, I've done the research on that, and I know that there are some vaccines out there. Some of the vaccines out there are produced and developed from the cells of aborted babies. Two of them, the Pfizer and the Moderna, are not.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about COVID-19.
Oh, just generally.
I'm talking in general.
Like the MMR, for example. I had no idea until basically it was past vaccinating my kids and stuff that the MMR might, and I don't know whether it's all versions of it or just certain ones, but that one is I think problematic in that way.
Right. Yeah, I didn't either until after my kids had all been vaccinated.
It's like wait a minute, why? And here's the thing: why haven't the shepherds of the church been talking about this stuff all along? Because if all the Catholics of the world had been of a mind and ready to lock arms with their bishops leading them and say, no, we reject this, well, companies would have come up with it a different way.
Right.
It wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, it's sad. But the thing is, people like Bill Gates, this is part of his agenda. And the idea behind it being a number of the beast kind of gets a little bit more real. And so, as Catholics, we've got to find a way around this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Bible talks about people not being able to engage in commerce and that kind of stuff, unless they accept the mark is how it puts it. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, there may be some thing at some point where, well, that's how it is. You want to walk into our store, you got to show your that you're medically cleared or something like that. For whatever. It might not be COVID, might be something else down the road a little bit, but certainly I can see how the whole, if you think of it, the COVID vaccination hysteria, the COVID hysteria, not just the vaccination,
right,
but the whole COVID hysteria might be a bit of a test run. And I'm not talking about some, world cabal sitting in their, high towers working out plans on chessboards and stuff like that. I'm talking about the mind of Satan, okay? I'm talking about demonic forces at work in the world.
Right.
This whole COVID hysteria might be a test run and a lead up and a enculturation for people for the next time around, which it might really be the kind of problematic thing. And it might, in fact, let's say it's not aborted babies, from 40 years ago or however many years ago, and cell lines that have just been kept alive. Let's say it's, you know what? We've found a vaccine, but in order to produce it, we've got to find this kind of person with this certain genetic marker, and we're going to have to sacrifice them. We'll give them some drugs and cause them to die a peaceful death, and then we've got to use their blood or whatever in order to produce the vaccine. What if it's something like that? I fear that if that kind of thing happened today, there's probably at least 10% of the population that would say, well, yeah, it's unfortunate that they have to die, but they have to because the rest of us need it. Now, 20 years down the road, is it only going to be 10%?
Well,
the way things are going, no.
The thing is,
it's going to be a lot more.
10% might go along with it, but I fear that almost 50% would never do anything to try to stop it.
Yeah. They would say, well, okay, yeah, it's unfortunate, and I'm really, really against it, but gosh, I have to shop, so I guess I'll have to get my card, and they go along with it anyway. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we've talked about Sodom and Gomorrah at one point, and God was saying, okay, if there's one good man in all of this, then I won't destroy the city. And it wasn't so much... 10. He got to 10? Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much that that every man in the city was trying to rape these angels. It was that nobody was trying to stop them. And we're getting close to that point here in America. Nobody's trying to stop the madness. And it's even worse than raping angels. It's killing babies. And not many people are...
The angels didn't even come into it until after God talked to Abraham and then went and he sent the angels to get Lot out. The city had been, the sins of the city had been crying out to God even before the angels got there.
Okay, so the angels weren't there to look for 10 good men.
No, the angels were there to get Lot out. The God said, God... He said, "I'll send my angels in," but it's like, well, they knew that there weren't. In fact, there were. It's kind of funny. It turned out that it was like right up to under 10. There was Lot, his wife. I think he had 3 daughters.
Yeah,
and they each had a fiance. Basically, I don't think there was a concept of a fiance. They were basically husbands, but they hadn't taken the daughters into their homes yet, or something like that. Okay. So that was like 8 people is what it came up to that were considered just.
And it turned out to be 7 because his wife
Well, she was just, but she looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. But actually, do you know that the sons, the husbands of the daughters, so the sons-in-law, they didn't even go out. They couldn't get them to go with them, so he just left with his wife and his daughters.
I did not know that.
I'm doing this Bible in a year thing.
Uh-huh.
And so, we'll have to talk about this. There was, I'm reading this stuff like for real and not just in a child religious textbook kind of storybook manner. There is stuff that is just like, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. This, I never knew this was here.
Yeah.
And, the stuff is so crazy that it has to be historically accurate too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's you've got in Sodom and Gomorrah, not even 10 good people. It was basically Lot and his family. But you're right, it wasn't necessarily that everybody was acting, in this evil way, but nobody was just enough to say, no, you can't do this. When the people stormed Lot's house, I mean, Lot even said, here, take my daughters and do with them what you will. But not a single man of the town was willing to say, hey, wait, guys, these are holy men. We should lay off.
You ever think of how Lot's daughters felt after that?
I know. It's like they walk out with it, and then what?
Really, Dad?
Come on, Dad. You were going to do that?
Wow. I'd have been pretty PO'd about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, women were thought of a little bit differently back then. But although,
so.
you still see hints of, like, for example, when the what was his name, Sechem or whatever his name was, that seduced Jacob's daughter, Israel's daughter, Dinah, and like all the brothers, because she had been defiled, they all got together and basically murdered everybody in the town.
Well, okay.
So, I mean, they did, consider, they held, there was some consideration of women, but I guess, Lot,
it was
wasn't so much
that really brought that out, though.
It was, but I think the seeds were there in Judaism even, and I think in Lot's defense, it wasn't that he didn't think of his daughters as valuable. It's just that being Abraham's nephew, Abraham talked with God, and I think Lot had this sense of what it meant for these holy men, these angels, messengers of the Lord, to be in his household and under his protection. And he thought of that aspect of it so highly and so seriously that he didn't have any other option but to say, but to try to go that way to protect them. So I think that's really what it was. Yeah.
Plus he knew they were all gay and they weren't going to go after his daughters anyway.
Which they did.
Maybe. Right.
Anyway, in America, that's,
Look, I think the one thing we should not do is, or I hope we don't do, is fall back into the us versus them routine with Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, it should never again. And that's one of the things I'm really hoping.
Sham.
I really hope that this is one of the legacies of Trump, that he ended the Republican versus Democrat dichotomy as it now stands, because it was a facade. It was a mirage.
Yeah.
And
I didn't even know how deep that went. I always thought it was there from reading people like Chesterton.
Mm-hmm.
Whoop. My microphone fell. Try that again. Who described, the political games that are being played as a football game. But I didn't realize how deep that went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Trump really brought that out.
You know who was pointing that out before, long before Trump came onto the scene, of course. I don't know if you remember or even knew of a guy named Joseph Sobran.
I've heard the name, but I don't know who he is.
Okay, he actually wrote for the National Review for a while. He was someone who looked at the interplay between the Democrats and Republicans, and he pointed out that, look, guys, if either one of you actually believed everything that you say in your platform, and you believed that the other believed everything they say in their platform, you would not treat politics as, and he didn't use the analogy, but like Chesterton, as a sports game where you play your best, you play for the joy of playing, and whoever happens to win the game, all go out and shake each other's hands afterwards, and so forth. If you really believe what's in your platform and they really believe what's in their platform, you would seriously believe that for them to be in power would be the ruination of America, and vice versa.
Right.
And it's the lack
Democrats
of that.
Behave.
Well, see, that's exactly the point. Democrats really behave that way towards Republicans, and Republicans have always refused to behave that way towards Democrats.
I guess maybe that's what's really happening here, is that the Republican Party has been kind of swallowed up, and there really isn't a Republican Party anymore. There's just a bunch
That's
of
what I think.
Husks and
What
empty
I think.
talking heads, puppets. I can see that,
and
it's a shame.
I mean, it used to be, roughly speaking, that the Democrats were old money, and old money tends to be associated with land, and so they also were the Southern plantation owners. They were the slave owners, and so on and so forth. And the Republican Party, the conservatives, the more party, were more associated with new money. Well, new money, how do you get new money? Well, that's through industry, that's through business, that's through building factories and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so there was this kind of strong alliance of Democrat agricultural slave culture, Republican business, industrial, and so forth. But I think what really happened is that over the course of a few generations, the Democrats never changed, but as money consolidated through various machinations of law that allowed, they created barriers to entry of certain industries through, some sham antitrust laws and stuff like that. The conservative Republicans became fundamentally old money.
Yeah.
And so now they treat their state in life as an entitlement and as a birthright every bit as much as the Democrats have always done. And I think that's really what happened, and that's why it's not so much that the Democrats and Republicans always just get along. It's more that the Republicans have kind of maintained their facade of their platform being conservative, but in reality they've gone and joined the Democrats as the entitlement establishment.
Yeah. So as voters now, we don't really have a choice.
Yeah,
there's no one to vote for.
Do you want to vote for fundamentally
this bad guy
a
or
socialist?
That bad guy?
Yeah. You want to vote for the bad guy who tells you what he's about, or the bad guy who pretends he's about something else?
Right.
The first one is the Democrat. The second one is the Republican.
So I don't think we really have a direction at this point politically.
No.
Our vote obviously doesn't matter at this point, and I think culturally we have to be there first.
Yeah, we have to.
We can't give ground on this. We have to take ground, not give ground, even if it's painful.
Right.
I mean, 2 weeks ago I was trying to think of ways we could hide ourselves in this culture and still exist. And I stopped at the store and I put my mask on and I'm walking around and, it was the first time in a while that I'd gone into a store without getting a stinky eye from people for not having a mask. And I thought, it's a lot easier to do this. And I thought, well, wait a minute. That's kind of what they want.
That's the point, isn't it? Exactly.
So going underground and disappearing, that's in Satan's plans. Put it that way.
Right.
That's not what we should do. We can't do that. And, Father, I don't know his name, but the homily this last week talked about the Holy Family and the fact that, look, it was hard. She's pregnant, and he suddenly gets a call, you got to go to Bethlehem to be counted because the government says you got to go to Bethlehem. All right, so he goes to Bethlehem.
So he did that.
And then within a year there, he's being told that
now you got to flee to Egypt.
Yeah, a whole army is after your baby just to kill him. And I guess what he ended up saying is there's no room for fear here. You have to rely on God, and God's plans might be martyrdom. Yeah. But even as a martyr,
but you know what? If you live, if you're living right, if you're living close to God, if you're doing the penances, and He calls you to martyrdom, well, on the other side of that, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I think that's something that our church leadership has lost the sense of.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That this life we live is tiny. Whether it's joy or suffering, whatever joy we have is tiny compared to the joy that we might have in heaven if we get there. And the suffering we have in this world is tiny compared to the suffering that we're going to experience if we don't get to heaven. This life is tiny. And death is our entry into the real thing. But which way we enter depends on how we live this life.
I'll draw an analogy here with addiction. And it doesn't matter what kind of substance, but let's just say heroin. To a heroin user, not having heroin is the end of the world. It's the worst thing that could possibly happen is you wake up tomorrow and you're unable to come up with your hit. And you'd practically be willing to die to not have that. It's absolutely a necessary part of your life.
Yeah. Okay.
Once you go through the pain of withdrawal, you get to a point where life is so much better because you no longer need it. And you realize, well, I don't have anything to fear anymore. And when we practice virtue and we obtain holiness, then the idea of being martyred is not so fearful.
Yeah.
And
I got a lot of work to do on that because...
Yeah, so do I.
I don't mind the concept of death. Like if somebody said, if you don't convert, I'm going to kill you with carbon monoxide poisoning, I'd be like, well, okay, no big deal. But, man, I am really afraid of pain.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. That's why we have to practice with things like fasting and...
Yeah, that's what it's all for.
It's part of it. So, start practicing, people.
And you know what? If we're going to talk about what we do going forward, I would call on every Catholic. Actually, I'd call on every Christian, but Catholics especially, like I said, because we have the Mass. And when we make acts of sacrifice, we're uniting them through the Mass with the cross. I don't think Protestants have that same sense of it.
Right.
But I would call on every Catholic to
I got to step away from the microphone for a minute.
To make this a year of reparation for the fact that we've put Biden in the White House. I mean, we should pray for Biden. We should pray for the conversion of Biden and all those other things. We should pray for healing for our country. Well, healing's got to start with, first of all, for example, recognizing that we can't keep slaughtering babies in the womb. Okay? But the fact that we put a Biden in the White House itself is a horrendous evil act on the part of our nation communally. We should all take it on ourselves to pick some kind of suffering that we're going to sustain for the year, maybe the whole 4 years. I don't know, but at least a year, and say, I'm going to make this an act of reparation on behalf of my nation for putting this evil man in the White House. I think that's something. In fact, the bishops, the sellout bishops who practically wanted him in the White House, if they were really about being leaders of the church, they would be calling on Catholics to do that. Because you know what? In America, you're still allowed to do that.
Let me shut this door. Okay. Sorry, folks. Reparation for Biden. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would specifically point out the fact that, I mean, look, it's not like I can point the finger at anyone, but I know that there are a lot of Trump supporters who were gung-ho about supporting Trump, but didn't have a Trump sign in their yard.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I
hate to point this out. This is your fault.
I'm one of them. Yeah.
And people who would not talk about Trump to their kids because they don't want to miss their grandchildren. I mean, this stuff happened a lot. And it's like, you know, I hate to point this out, but this is why we're in this position, because people were afraid.
Afraid to speak their minds.
And so it's time to both speak your mind and, like you said, do some kind of reparation. Because we did let this happen.
Yep.
And
now,
the bishops, of course, well,
I'm going to suggest another thing. I'm going to suggest, so this year from December 8th, 2020 to December 8th, 2021 is the year of St. Joseph. And as part of the year of St. Joseph, the Pope has established a number of different opportunities for indulgences, plenary indulgences. So this is a full release from purgatory.
Pope Francis did?
Huh. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and even if he's, you know, on a lot of things, he's wacko wrong, even if he's apostate, it seems often in terms of some of his beliefs, the Abu Dhabi statement and all that kind of weird stuff, he's still the Pope, and he has the authority to grant these indulgences.
Yes, he does.
So here's what I would say. Here's what I would recommend to Catholics. Take advantage of these. Find a few opportunities throughout the year. Get the plenary indulgence and apply it to somebody, do some research, apply it to somebody significant who maybe has converted, but maybe converted from a life where there may be a lot of purgatory time for them. The example I keep thinking of is Bernard Nathanson. He was the abortionist who did the Silent Scream movie. And performing that ultrasound movie completely converted him against abortion, and eventually he converted to the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Has anybody done an indulgence and applied that to him? I think that would be a great thing to do. Now,
is he still alive?
No, he died.
Okay.
That's why I'm thinking, for all these abortions he performed, who knows how much time he's going to spend in purgatory.
Right.
But you can get him out by applying an indulgence to him.
And then just allow God to apply it to someone else if he's out.
Yeah, if he's out, God can apply it to someone else. Or you could do things like, I'm going to apply this indulgence to the person who is, the deepest in purgatory, if you want to think of it that way. However you do it, but get these indulgences and don't apply them to yourself. I mean, of course, apply some to yourself.
You're going to have to.
We all sin, we all need them. But apply them to people that are in purgatory, and then as not a condition, but as a consideration, as a request, put with it, okay, now you, whoever has received this indulgence from me, I ask you now in heaven with God to pray for our country.
Yeah.
Do that.
That's a good plan.
I think
I'll have to look into some of these indulgences. We should, the next show, we should list off some of these indulgences that people can get.
And remind people of what you need to do to receive an indulgence.
Yeah, there are conditions. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that next show.
So, yeah, I mean, we've got the Mass, We've got these, indulgences. We've got our own reparations that we can unite with the cross. I think there is a spiritual wealth, and I know that there are some Catholics, a few of them, that are already, doing this stuff.
Yeah.
But at least in terms of their own personal sacrifice. But I don't know how many have thought of the whole indulgence thing and then saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this for you," and if it's God's will, ask Him to save our country.
Right. Because it would be a nice country to save.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so unique, and it's a shame if it ends here.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was the other thing, is that there were so many people who thought that Trump was going to save everything, but all they had to do was just vote for him. And as much damage has been done, the fact that we've killed so many millions of babies, we're not gonna get off that easy.
No.
We don't just get to cast a few votes and then that's what saves the country. It's going to take a lot more than that, and a lot of people are going to have to do something, not just vote. And you don't get to hide, and there's a lot of things you don't get to do. And I think hopefully a lot of people will start to understand that.
Right.
With this election.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's going to take more than just voting. We got work to do, and it's time to roll up our sleeves and do it.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into the whole reparation message, doesn't it? I mean, we've got reparation to do. We have to. It's kind of weird because the Americans who most value our unique American character are also the ones who are most likely to understand the need for the humility to say, okay, we've sinned by letting this happen in our country. We've got to make reparations for it in order to become, great again.
Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural speech, he talks about the number of the dead in the Civil War, and he said that slavery is such a bad thing, especially the way it was practiced in America, to where human beings become machines that we control, that it took all of that death to wash away the guilt from our country. And I always think to myself, how much more is it going to take to wash away the guilt of abortion?
Oh gosh, that's true. If you believe his words, then how much more does that apply to abortion? Yeah, that's true. That's true. So
I wrote down a quote here from Abraham Lincoln
civil war
that I wanted to talk about. Is this it? Here it is. I just, when it comes to what's going to happen in the next, say, 10 years, I did want to pull up this quote by Abraham Lincoln. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. And I think that applies now. We are committing suicide right now.
Yeah.
With this vote for socialism, and or not the vote for socialism, but allowing socialism to take over like this.
Right. We're committing a national suicide.
And that's what's happening. So we have to stop killing ourselves, and as you said, we got to repent, and we got to roll up our sleeves and get to work.
However, I do want to offer some hope for the whole get to work thing. If we go back to thinking culturally, first of all, look at things. Let's look in the Catholic world. The United States is sort of it has drawn, let's say, the annoyance, the ire of Pope Francis. Why? Because of the traditional Mass. We already know that he dislikes the traditional Mass. And he does not understand why it's becoming increasingly popular. It's growing in popularity, especially in the United States. So we've got that going on, and I think we've got an increasing number of young people who are sort of like I always did. I kind of rebelled against the educational institutions, and that rebellion made me conservative. It's which is kind of weird, because in the 50s that rebellion would have made me, a hoodlum or whatever.
Right.
But it made me conservative. And I think that phenomenon is also happening.
Yes, it is.
And so we've got that going on. And so even after 50 years of directed intentional attempts by both high schools and colleges to make themselves into factories of Marxism. I mean, these colleges have been deliberately attempting to do whatever they can to turn out Marxists.
Right.
And instead, even with all of that going on for 50 years, in 2016, as a nation, we elected Donald Trump to the White House. And then in 2020, he had massive support, from the American population, in spite of 4 years of the news media trying to disparage him and paint him as some kind of, white supremacist or whatever. These facts should be heartening to us. These should give us hope. And then all of the things that are going on with big tech, and even earlier than that, within college campuses, you had, so-called speech codes.
Yeah.
People would be reported for saying the wrong things. We had the thing where the guy in Google internally wrote a memo and say, hey guys, the way you're approaching this in terms of diversity, maybe it's not the best way to do that. Simply for calling that into question, he was fired summarily. And then now, with the censoring from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other, whatever social media sites there are, why should we take heart of this? Because these are the acts of desperation. These are the acts of somebody who is against the ropes, and they know it.
Yeah.
So we should not look at this and despair ourselves. We should look at this and say, hey, we've got them on the run. Let's keep pressing the advantage. Let's get louder. Let's push ourselves more into the public square, and let's keep pressing the message that this leftist liberal, bullcrap that has been shoved down so many people's throats for the last 40, 50 years is exactly that. And you don't need it. And it's bad for you. So
right. If we were the minority, they wouldn't have to silence us.
That's right.
You don't silence the minority. You just ignore them.
Exactly.
And they can't ignore us.
What's the? I think it was actually Mahatma Gandhi, in India, who said, how did he say it? First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win.
Yeah.
It's almost like what's going on here.
Right.
So I say, take heart and keep pressing and get louder.
And once again, I would point out how grateful we need to be to President Trump for bringing us together and aside from shedding a light on the serious problem that exists in America right now, he showed us that there is hope because we can find each other. There are others out there like us, and we can gather and we can make noise. And it was Trump who did that for America, because I think most Americans thought for many years now that we were alone, that just me and a couple of my friends who think that way and no one else thinks this way. But
we
Trump
felt
brought
isolated.
us all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he shed a light on the fact that you can actually accomplish something. It's not just that he brought us together, so now we know we all existed. He brought us together, and by himself getting into the White House, showed us that we can be effective.
That's the other thing he did, is that he showed how useless politicians are.
That's true. That's so true.
Everything that they said could not be done, he did.
Yeah.
despite the fact that they all fought him every step of the way.
Yeah, he was effective in spite of being, opposed constantly. It's like, okay, just think if we had Trump plus,
25% of
25% of people like Trump in both houses of Congress. And even, okay, and that's in terms of especially like foreign policy and that kind of stuff. Think of if our states all had, people who thought like Trump and worked like Trump, politically speaking, in our various state governments and that kind of stuff. How awesome our states would be individually, every one of them.
I think we would
have a
erase
true
poverty.
Republic. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the only people who would be in true poverty would be the ones who gave themselves completely over to, drug habits and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. And
so
we would be exporting wealth to the world too and benefiting the rest of the world.
Again, yeah. But that's not the case. So
nope, it's not. So we got a lot of work to do.
All right. Well, how about current events? There are some other things that, a little bit. I mean, most of it's the Trump stuff, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not
for current events. No, it's time to.
Well, the thing is, I mean, we always meant this to be a
Catholic
podcast, and occasionally politics trickled into that. And
we're in a time where
now that Trump's gone, I'm not going to sit around and talk about Democrats. I'm just not going to do it.
No,
about
we're going to get back to
Catholic
things. Stuff. Yeah,
yeah, but current events is time to talk about some of the crazy things that.
That's true.
For example, Mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, he says he's going to end all contracts with the Trump organization because of Trump's incitement, which I think is kind of funny considering Trump moved to Florida last year, and I didn't know he had any contracts with. I didn't know New York City had any contracts with anyone anymore, considering the fact that it's empty.
Everybody's moving out of it.
Yeah. What does this guy think he's... These people are so full of themselves, and after they destroy things, they act like, oh, well, whatever. So the Vatican museums have... they're going to stay shut down for a while because of COVID-19 and Italy law, which I don't understand why they're paying attention to Italian lawmakers, but...
Yeah, they don't... I don't think... I thought the Vatican... because the Vatican has their own ambassadors and everything. I didn't think they were subject
well,
to
maybe
Italian
it's
law.
not the law. Maybe they just think COVID is too big in Italy, and so they're going to stay shut down. I don't know. But either way, they're going to stay shut down for a while. I was hoping all this would end with Biden, because maybe they'll think, well, we've won now, we don't have to keep pushing this agenda. But, I think we brought up before that this gave a whole bunch of people a taste of the kind of power they could have. And they're using it now, and they're enjoying it. These governors and mayors and stuff like that. So I guess they're going to maintain control for a little while and keep pushing and pushing. The International Atomic Energy Agency says that Iran now has enough enriched uranium to make a nuclear weapon.
Okay.
So
we've got Iran with enough uranium for nukes and Biden in the White House.
Yeah, so I guess, I never knew. Does Iran want a nuclear weapon to use, or to use as a weapon, or to use as a bargaining chip?
I think both. I think their intention is I think they're going to end up producing nukes, and then they're going to say, they're going to use it as a weapon in the same sense that U.S. and Russia used them as weapons during the Cold War. It's not as a bargaining chip in the sense that, okay, we'll give up our nukes if. It's more okay, now we've got nukes. What are you going to do? You got to take us seriously now. And we want to be a major voice in Middle East affairs.
Yeah. So I guess, you had said from way back when, if Biden gets in, we're going to see groups like ISIS starting up again. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see and pray. Mm-hmm. 8 officials are charged, along with former Governor Rick Snyder, for their roles in the Flint water crisis. Did you know much about the Flint, Michigan water thing?
Just a little bit.
Did you pay attention to it?
I remember looking it up to see what it was all about at one time. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the people who should have been monitoring water quality and that kind of stuff, I think were fudging reports or buying off officials or something like that. It really was bad quality and bad water. So it was a real thing. But, it happened in Michigan, which...
Yeah. Michigan is, I don't know. I see places like that is kind of, you would think socialists would say, you could point and say, see, this is the kind of thing that happens in socialism.
It happens like massively.
Crony capitalism.
The kind of stuff that happened in Flint, Michigan was constantly happening in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Heck, Chernobyl.
Look at Chernobyl, for example.
So, I don't know. Well, some of them are gonna, I guess, they're being charged. I don't know if they're gonna go to jail or just, have to pay some money. But they're, some of them are charged with involuntary manslaughter because of 9 people who died from Legionnaire's disease.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
So, yeah,
what happens.
That could become serious for them.
I don't think these people ever go to jail. But there's a caravan of at least 6,000 Honduran migrants, immigrants, bound for the U.S. And we're trying to stop them, apparently. And then Guatemalan police reported that around 4,000 were held up at Guatemala. And I guess they're trying to disperse them, but I think these caravans are starting up again and they're going to continue, and that's going to be the thing again, Trump stopped it for a while, and here we go again.
Yeah, no, but give us enough years under Democrat rule and the caravans will be in the opposite direction because nobody will want to live in the United States.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think we got a while to go before that happens, though.
Yeah, we have a lot of reserve in terms of American goodness.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, so
what do you got?
I've got a few things from the Nation of Nonsense. And I'm going to apologize to everybody because I've been looking up these things online while we were doing this podcast because I didn't have them lined up.
Okay,
hold on just a minute. I gotta read this one. This is.
We'll just take a break. I think I have sniffed considerably less this time.
Oh, okay. So. Dad gets an idea to gift everybody a one of those DNA things. You know how you can send your DNA into places like Ancestry or other things.
Okay.
So he decided he was going to give her his family DNA test as a gift.
Each person's or just
in his family
collectively?
Yeah. So he gave each person. He gave them all a gift.
Oh,
hey,
wow.
do your DNA, send it in. So
you see where this is going.
Yeah, well, woman, McDonald family. So you're thinking, okay, Irish, and she finds out she's 75% Norwegian, and the rest is German, not British at all. So she logged in to see if she had any matches. She had an exact paternal match, except it wasn't her dad.
Wow.
Apparently, he was an old family friend, someone whose genealogy literally exudes privilege.
Uh-oh.
Some billionaire.
No, really?
Let's see. I'm trying to read the story real quick.
Okay.
Nope. Okay, that's it. Yeah, she learned that her dad is really some billionaire.
Some billionaire. Well,
because her real dad, the dad who raised her, gave her a gift of a DNA kit.
Yeah. Can you imagine that phone call? Hey, guess what? You're my dad.
Know. Yeah.
Give me some money.
And I've got proof.
What about the mom? Is the mom still alive?
Yep.
That would have been a nice conversation.
I'm sure not.
Hey, guess what I found out?
Although I get the impression that the mom and dad aren't together.
Yeah,
so
maybe
they're probably divorced.
Maybe that was why.
It could be. All right, so we got a car thief in Beaverton, Oregon. He stole a car, found a baby in the back seat. So the mom was in the grocery store while doing some quick shopping, and he jacked the car and got away with it.
Where was this? California?
No, Oregon.
4-year-old.
Okay. In the back seat of the car. So he steals the car, and once he realizes that there's a baby in the back seat, he drives back to the shopping center to lay into the mom about leaving her kid in the back seat. Threatens to call the police on her.
So I wonder if she ended up calling the police on him.
I know. That's weird.
That's kind of a wink and a nod there. It's like, I broke the law and you broke the law. I guess we'll just not talk about this. But somehow it ends up on the news, I guess.
Yeah.
Somebody called the police.
Somebody called the police. All right. So in New Jersey, a conviction has been overturned. Man convicted of second-degree robbery, which requires use of force or threat of force. Now, here's the thing that the guy, if you look just at his actions, technically he committed third-degree robbery or third-degree theft, but the prosecutors during the trial, all he did was hand him.
Wait a minute.
So
Go over these degrees of robbery first.
Okay, so second degree requires the use of force or the threat of force.
Okay.
Third degree doesn't involve force or the threat of force.
Like shoplifting. Okay.
Yeah, for example.
So one at gunpoint and one is shoplifting, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So apparently I don't know what he did. Maybe handed over a note or something like that. Let's see. It doesn't really even say what he robbed. No, it was a bank robbery. Okay. So he must have handed over a note or something like that. Hey, put the money.
Yeah. But
here's the thing. No threatening words were spoken to the bank teller. But the prosecution got the conviction by showing that they wanted to show that you can be threatening with the context in your actions regardless of how, what your words are.
Yeah.
And so during the trial, they played for the benefit of the jury the segment of The Shining where Jack Nicholson chops through the door and he does the famous "Here's Johnny" scene.
Here's Johnny. Yeah.
So that, showing that scene to the jury convinced them that, he must have really been threatening even though he didn't say anything threatening.
Yeah.
And so they convicted him. Well, the court has overturned that, saying, no, that did not meet a burden of proof of establishing threat.
He did not have an axe and chop down a door and say, "Here's Johnny."
Say, "Here's Johnny." Whatever he did say doesn't constitute the kind of threat that was implied there.
Well, bank robberies have gotten more and more popular because they've discovered that they don't have to show anyone a gun. So a kid walks in and says, "Give me your money." The teller has been instructed, and I think this ends up going back to insurance. Mm-hmm. The tellers are supposed to just give them money, and then after the person has left, then they're allowed to sound the alarm. They're not even allowed to sound the alarm until after the guy has left. So I walk in, I don't have to show anyone a gun. I don't even have to say I have a gun. I just have to insinuate that someone will be hurt if I don't get money. And as long as the teller understands that, then according to most bank rules, they go along with it. But according to the law, I never had a weapon, so I can't be charged with any serious crimes. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of that's why bank robberies are so popular. I mean,
I did not
they were getting robbed. I was seeing a story almost every other day in Cincinnati here. A bank was being robbed, and it was for that reason. So I think I don't know where my opinion is on that. I mean, if you go into a bank and insinuate you have a gun, or insinuate somebody's going to get hurt if they don't give you money, I don't know. Then again, maybe these banks should be a little bit more hardcore about protecting their money. Maybe the federal government should say, look, we're not going to insure you for this money if this guy walks in and just says, give me your money, and he doesn't even have a gun. Mm-hmm. If you need to start protecting our money. That's what needs to happen. They need to tell these tellers, look, if a guy doesn't have a gun, quit giving him money.
Yeah. At least make him show you the goods before you give him the goods. I mean,
but why would a bank, if
make him
it's
prove
federally
that he's
insured,
capable of doing harm?
Right. And if it's insured, and the bank is like, we're not going to lose anything if we give him the money, well, then they have no incentive to stop people from robbing banks. And it creates this huge problem.
Yeah.
But if the banks were like, well, no, that's our money, and we're not going to give it to you, then the problem would stop.
That's our client's money, and we're not going to give it to you. That's the
right.
That's the thing. You give your money to a bank with the expectation of security. That's part of why you deposit your money with a bank.
But even there, as a client, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if somebody robs them because the federal government insures it, or even a private company insures it. The fact is they're insured, and even if somebody robbed them of every single penny, my money's still going to be there. And that encourages crime.
Because those insurance amounts, those insurances are like up to a certain amount per account and stuff like that. But here's the thing: banks have to pay for that insurance.
Yeah, do they?
Yeah, it's a product. I think even the federal insurance they have to pay for. So what does that mean? That means that the more banks are getting robbed like this, the more they're giving their money away by not even requiring the bank robber to show a gun. The higher the cost of that insurance.
Yeah,
it's going to require more money to insure banks to get against getting robbed if they're going to be robbed more often. So that money that could instead be used to, for example, pay out interest on depositor accounts and stuff like that is being spent on insurance against these robberies that they're not even asking the guy to produce a gun for.
Yeah.
So, it's a real problem.
Right now, bank robbery is a very lucrative career, I think. Well, I don't know how many of these people get caught.
I absolutely know what I'm saying about that the insurance goes up. I'm sure that the insurance premiums are fixed in law and that kind of stuff. But whether it's fixed in law or not,
we should quit giving people money who don't at least have a gun to rob a bank with.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, at least produce some kind of evidence that shows you have the capability of being serious about this. Or another way to think of it is, hey, if you're going to take my money, I want my bank to at least establish as a baseline, look, we're going to up the ante here. If you're going to do this, then you have to first demonstrate that getting caught is going to be very expensive to you. It's going to be second degree, not third degree.
Yeah.
So
the problem in all of this is that there's some bank teller who gets paid $15 an hour to sit there and protect everyone's money, and she's the first line of defense, and it gets traumatized by it because some wacko pulled out a gun and started, or even kills her. And so Vicky worked at a bank, and it was a terrible bank, but she ended up quitting, and a week later they got robbed.
Wow. Thing is, I don't think guys who rob if you're going to go in with a gun, I still don't think most people who rob a bank intend to actually shoot someone. You could just kind of flash your gun a little bit. See here, look, I got a gun. You don't need to.
All right. Is that your last story?
No, that was my first one, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, no, my first one was the DNA test. That was
your third one. DNA.
Oh, that's right. DNA, and then the stolen car, and then the bank thing. Okay, so no, my next one, so this is kind of weird. A couple, so I guess on Myrtle Beach, do you remember, we didn't go to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. We went North Carolina to...
I don't remember which beach. I remember the trip.
No. We went to North Carolina Outer Banks, but it seems to me we also made a stop at Myrtle Beach in South Carolina.
Could be.
Okay, regardless, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, this couple, I guess they've got, they've got like the beach walk and stuff, and so they've got like this sort of, not carnival, but amusement park kind of atmosphere. So they've got this big Ferris wheel with these glass gondolas. And so this couple was arrested for having sex in one of them.
Oh, jeez.
Publicly exposed.
Wait a minute. Now, describe that ride again.
It's a Ferris wheel. So, the big wheel that goes around. The kind that, you would sit in a seat and you might take a girl on and maybe you manage to steal a kiss or something when you're up in the top part or something. Okay, so
you make her real scared by rocking back and forth.
Or something like that, right. So instead of those seats, this one has these gondolas, gondolas. I don't know.
What's a gondola?
A gondola, kind of a. Think of it as like an enclosed cart. Yeah. So
okay.
It's not the same kind of thing necessarily. And maybe it holds more people or something like that. But anyway, they're glass, so people can see into them. So I guess this couple got on one and started, going at it.
Not sure why they thought they could.
Well, I think it was a thing. Yeah, he did, and I think it was a thing. I think they're one of those couples that goes around and films themselves doing this in public places and then sells them to, I don't know, porn sites or something stupid like that. But, so, anyway, last one. This is kind of cool. Kentucky man going viral for clearing his driveway of snow using a flamethrower. About a 30-second clip.
That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
I've been thinking about making one of those. Mm-hmm. But I'm afraid I'll blow myself up.
Hey, okay, let's go the opposite way, though. A neighbor of mine, and by that I mean a guy who's in our neighborhood, and by that I mean a guy who's in the rich part of our neighborhood. I'm in the non-rich part of our neighborhood.
Yeah.
He got bored, and he's an engineer, so he took an air compressor and a pressure washer that he had, and between them, he made a snowmaker.
Oh, he made snow.
Like the kind that they have on ski slopes. Okay. If it gets cold, they can make these snowmakers. So he made one, and he put snow out on his front yard when nobody else had snow.
Well, that's pretty cool.
That was really cool.
I'd still rather have a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Greg had kind of a mini flamethrower, and we were down at camp and wanted to do something with it, so we made this long trail of gasoline through the yard that led to the big fire pit. And he's walking along with his flamethrower down at his side, and then all of a sudden happens to hit that gasoline, and we got some video where he jumps up. Oh no, he started a fire. We tried to film it anyway.
Was he acting?
Yeah, so it was all a big...
Oh, okay.
We did this all so that we could film it, and then
it
didn't film too well. You can't really tell what's going on, but that was the idea. As he's walking along with his
flamethrower, and then suddenly catches.
Suddenly, the whole ground lights up, and then,
yeah,
the kinds of stupid things we did at camp. But
like Uncle Joe getting his eyebrows singed.
Did he get his eyebrows singed?
Yeah, he didn't know.
I thought he got his toes cut off.
That was a lawnmower, and that wasn't at camp. That was at his mom's, but Granny B. But no, he was dad. He didn't know that. I think it was Dad or somebody had poured kerosene or gasoline, or I think it was gasoline over a log to that they were going to use to try to start a fire around, and he was going to, and he had a lighter that he was, so he's like right up to it with a lighter. He's trying to light some paper under it. Didn't smell the gasoline, and then whoop, right into his face, completely singed his eyebrows off.
Yeah, we've had a lot of big fires down there. I had they did one where they had to they spent the whole day with a truck going back and forth to this place getting pallets and just piling them up. And then just lit the thing. They didn't even set any to the side to throw on the fire later. They just piled them up.
Wow.
I wasn't there for that fire. But they've had some pretty big fires down there.
Yeah.
And I think the last big fire we had, one of our cousins brought down I guess he shops at Amazon all the time. So he had just huge amounts of Amazon boxes. And he's in Cincinnati, so you can only throw away so much. And,
I see. I was gonna say,
he brought all his Amazon boxes, pretty much a truckload of Amazon boxes, and they're just throwing them on there. And the fire's getting big, and it's right next to a tree. And I'm trying to tell them, guys, it's going to catch this tree on fire. They wouldn't listen to me, and then lo and behold, the tree catches on fire.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to put the tree out, and finally, I didn't realize that one of them had a chainsaw. They had been planning on cutting the tree down anyway. And that's why they weren't worried about it catching on fire. But
they could have told
you. They let me get all excited trying to put this fire out.
And they were just going to cut the tree down anyway.
They got this huge fire, and at the corner of the huge fire is a small tree getting caught on fire. And I'm trying to put that tree out, which is... It just looks silly, Me trying to dump water on this giant fire, and... Finally was like, all right, Eric, settle down. We'll do it. And they went and got their chainsaw and cut it down. Oh, well.
Everybody should have a camp they can do stuff at.
Yeah. It's part of becoming a man, I guess.
Some kind of rite of passage. All right. Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay. Well, we're about 2 hours in, so...
Yeah, this was a long one.
Yeah. I guess just remember what we said. Think about what we said, and
as always,
keep praying and
circle the beads.
Circling them beads. That's all we got right now.
Yep.
Bye.